the game of the college football season at the time. That being, of course, Michigan 30-24, their victory over the Ohio State Buckeyes. We both pretty much called it. Maybe it was a little bit more high scoring than we thought. I kind of thought 23-20 as opposed to 30-24. But in the end, Michigan ran the football down Ohio State's throat in the second half. And they proved that, and I'll say when we get to our next topic, we talk about the four best teams in college football. I think Michigan proved they are the best team in the country. They had the better quarterback, they had the better roster. And for those Ohio State fans that are making excuses that the only reason why Michigan won the last 2 years because they cheated, you can't say nothing anymore.
No, because of Michigan's 3 consecutive victories in the series, this was the closest one. And this was the one where you legitimately thought, okay, Ohio State might be able to win this. And other than Travion Henderson and Marvin Harrison Jr., did anybody really stand out for Ohio State? No. Whereas with Michigan, you had J.J. McCarthy step up when he needed to. You had Blake Corum. You had, I believe the other running back's name is Donovan Edwards. They were making plays. Michigan's receivers were making plays when called upon to do so. If Michigan needed a big stop on third down defensively, they were able to get those stops. Whereas Ohio State, it didn't seem like they ever really trusted their playmakers. That was my biggest takeaway from it. Did you kind of see it that same way?
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw, again, I was not able to sit down for 3 hours and watch this entire game. I was at family events all day Saturday, so I caught bits and pieces of it. I caught most of the second half, especially the fourth quarter. But it just felt like to me that again in the second half, Michigan just really took control. They ran the football, they inserted their dominance, and they forced Ohio State to sort of pass the ball and not really get into their run game. I guess for me, the most interesting aspect of this game, and this is where I don't understand the mentality of college football fans, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, a little bit as a fan of Penn State and what you've gone through with James Franklin. There's a lot of Ohio State fans that think Ryan Day should be fired.
I agree with that statement.
See, and I'm saying timeout. The guy loses one game a year. Next year, when we go to the 12-team college football playoff, this game is not going to mean not nearly as much because both of these teams, now we'll see what happens with Michigan, obviously, in the Harbaugh scandal when they're recruiting. But especially for Ohio State, their only potential loss of the season, maybe a better Penn State team, maybe a better Michigan team, they're still going to be in the college football playoff. We know Ryan Day is a
Not this
really good
season,
coach.
they won't.
But Josh, we know Ryan Day is a really good coach. We know they should have won the national championship last year. They just would have made that field goal against Georgia. They would have obliterated TCU in the national championship. And I'm sorry, but you just knew. Ohio State fans, you had to be realistic. This was not your year. Your quarterback's not better than Michigan. Your offensive line's not better than Michigan. Your defensive line may be similar to Michigan. But Michigan overall has the better roster, and this was their year, and this is their team. Like, are we really going to fire a coach because he loses on average one game a season? I don't understand that mentality.
Okay, here's the thing. When you sign up to be the head coach at the Ohio State University, because you know Ohio State fans are going to lose it if we don't say the Ohio State. What's one of the key things you have to do? Beat the Michigan Wolverines, because that Ohio State-Michigan is one of the top 5 rivalries, in all of sports. I don't know what Christopher Mad Dog Russo was talking about earlier. He did a whole top 5 of rivalries. He had Yankees Red Sox number 1. He had Celtics Lakers 2. Then he had Chiefs Raiders 3. And then he had Duke, North Carolina 4, and then he had Texas, Oklahoma 5. He didn't even have Michigan, Ohio State in his top 5. I'm sorry, Mad Dog, but are you out of your freaking mind?
Okay, I don't care about Mad Dog's rankings of rivalries. The only thing I'll push back on you is all these Michigan fans wanted to run Jim Harbaugh out of town for about 5 years when he couldn't beat Ohio State. And look at your team now. And this is the last year that we're going to have the 14 college football playoff. I'll say this, after this year, I almost guarantee you Ohio State will be one of the 12 teams in the CFP or whatever they're going to call it from now until basically eternity until they fall off the earth. Because that's the way college football works.
Okay, but here's the thing. It's when you sign up, again, I'll say it again. When you sign up to be the head coach at Ohio State, what are your two main objectives? Number one, beat Michigan. Number two, win national championship.
Okay, that I don't get that mentality.
Are you
gotta understand
what?
me. Number one, first of all, should be win the national championship. Nothing that shouldn't be beat Michigan. If we go, you're telling me if you go 4-8, let's say, but you beat Michigan, that's a successful season? Hell no. Your brand should be national championship or bust. I understand that. But this year is a different year because you did not have the right quarterback.
Look at Ryan Day's history, though. He didn't beat Georgia last year. I understand that it came down to a field goal. He did not beat Alabama in the national championship.
Okay, but those are better teams.
I'm not done.
They were just better teams.
He did not beat Clemson in the college football
Once again, a better team.
And he's lost to Michigan 3 years in a row.
So let's see. So who had the better quarterbacks in those scenarios? It was Trevor Lawrence against a very young C.J. Stroud, or it might have even been Dwayne Haskins, but I believe it was Stroud. Could have been Fields as well. But in that situation, Trevor Lawrence was the better quarterback. Dabo had the better recruits. Clemson was the better team that year.
That was also the game where, with the controversy because of the holding call and the pass.
Yeah, I remember that. See, Ohio State fans are like San Francisco 49ers fans.
We'll get to the 49ers. We will get there.
They're needy. They're whiny. They think the whole world's against them. Like, remember, Ohio State fans, you guys were laughing, saying, oh, look, they're going to run Jim Harbaugh out of town. Michigan can't beat us. And now the shoe's on the other foot. I guarantee you, in 2 to 3 years, Ohio State will be boat racing Michigan, especially if their head coach is not there at the end of this year. Like, can we just take a chill pill? It's not your year. It's okay. Sometimes you need a little bit of a down year. There's going to be a good recruiting class. They have good 5-star quarterbacks coming on the roster. They should have never got rid of Quinn Ewers, which is a different conversation for a different day. But Ohio State's going to be fine. Stop trying to fire the coach. Like, this isn't Brandon Staley here. We're not talking about an Neptune coach.
Brandon Staley should have been fired after that collapse by the Chargers at the end of the playoff game. But nonetheless, which 4 teams do you think are going to reach the college football playoff?
Okay, right? Josh. So this is the only fair way that I think that you can do this. Because it's hard without knowing the scenario. So I'm just going to lay scenarios out to you.
Go.
I don't understand the sentiment among people that think if Alabama doesn't beat Georgia, they're still not going to get in. If Bama beats Georgia, they're in. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
100%.
They're the number 1 team in the country, so Bama wins, they're probably in. The issue with that's going to be if Texas wins. Texas has a legitimate gripe because they're the ones that knocked off Alabama, and they would be the Big 12 champion. However, the other issue here is the game Friday night that takes place between Oregon and Washington.
This is the key game, in my opinion.
So this is my thinking. I already mentioned it. If Bama beats Georgia, they're both in. We already know Michigan is in. So that, to me, is 3 spots. Georgia's in no matter what. They're the back-to-back defending champions. Their only loss would be to Bama. They have to be in. You
Not
cannot not
necessarily.
you cannot not leave Georgia out of the college football playoff. I
Yes, you
think it's
can.
absolutely insane. No, I don't think you can. I think Georgia's already punched their ticket, win or lose.
I don't.
So I think it comes down then to the winner of Oregon or Washington. Because if Oregon wins, to me, it becomes a discussion. If Oregon and Bama win, it becomes a discussion between Washington and Georgia. And I'm sorry, we all know between those two teams, Georgia is the better football team, which would leave Washington out, which would leave Texas out. Now, if Bama loses to Georgia, and if Oregon loses to Washington, Oregon would be out because they have two losses. Obviously, Bama would be out because they have two losses. You would have Michigan, Georgia, Washington. And I believe that then will lead to Texas if they win, or dare I say, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
No way.
That is the path for Ohio State to get into the playoff. And don't give me Florida State. They have a backup quarterback. I can't believe the committee put them number 4 in the country. Who the hell thinks Florida State is a top 4 team in the country? They're not. They're 7 or 8. They're not number 4. I don't care if they're undefeated. They haven't played anybody.
I fully agree with you. You and I are in lockstep with each other on this one. If Florida State gets into the college football playoff, it's going to be like TCU in the national championship last year. I know that people thought Georgia was going to wreck TCU last season, but to that extent, even I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, even if Florida State wins the ACC championship against Louisville, no, they should not go to the college football playoff. I don't care that they would be undefeated. Hell no. So, my prediction, Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Texas at 4, which means Alabama gets left out, Oregon gets left out, and Ohio State gets left out. I think there is no way Ohio State is getting into the college football playoff, even if Oregon loses, or Georgia loses.
If Oregon, Texas, and Bama all lose, Ohio State's in. How could they not be in? It would be Washington, Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State. If Texas loses, they're not going to be in. And Ohio State would have the best loss out of all of those teams. Texas, and then obviously Bama with 2 losses at that point. Oregon would have 2 losses at that point. But we all love Oregon, 2 losses, you can't get in. That is the path for Ohio State to get into the playoff. There is a small chance. Now, in my opinion, this is how it's going to go. Number 1 is going to be the Michigan Wolverines. Number 2 is going to be the Oregon Ducks, who defeat Washington in that rematch Friday night.
I can't wait for that game. You have no idea.
Number 3, the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, Crimson Tide. And number 4 will be the matchup that we should have got last year in the championship game, Georgia. It will be Alabama against Oregon. It will be Michigan against Georgia. 2 SEC teams make it for possibly the final time in the 4. Well, it will be in the 4-seed era. Michigan represents the Big Ten, and then obviously Oregon in there with the Pac-12 for basically the last time with the Pac-12.
Yeah, so I agree with you about Michigan being number 1. Georgia is going to be number 2. I've got Washington coming in at number 3, and I've got Texas coming in at number 4.
See, here's my thing, because you don't think Bama's going to beat Georgia. I think Bama is going to do exactly what they did against Auburn. They may not throw a 4th and 20 at the back of the end zone to win a game, but they're going to win the game at the last second, and that means if Bama beats Georgia, they had to be ranked above Georgia. That's why I put Bama at 3, Georgia at 4, and I think you can slide Oregon in at 2. And I think Oregon and Michigan are probably the 2 best teams. The problem's going to be if Oregon loses 2 close games to Washington, I could also see a scenario where let's say if Georgia beats Bama, even if Texas wins, if that Oregon Washington game is really close down to the wire again, if Oregon were to win that, you could say, oh, we could put Oregon and Washington both in along with Georgia and Michigan. And that's your four. There are a lot of different scenarios, but I think even before the Michigan game, by 7 o'clock Saturday night, we will know the four teams because the two results that really matter are Oregon, Washington, Bama, Georgia. Those are the two games that really matter to me.
I actually think the Oregon Washington game is slightly more important in this equation than the Georgia Alabama game because of everything you've been saying. Like the gap between Washington and Oregon is so small that whoever wins that game is is probably going to be in.
No, whoever wins is in.
Yes.
There's no debate. Whoever wins is in. Now,
but do you get where I'm going with that?
Now, the problem is this year we have so many good teams. We've been saying all year long that if Oregon loses, they have to be out just because it wouldn't be fair to put a 2-loss Oregon win team over, let's say, a Texas. But at the end of the day, that's what we have to go.